Ready? Play.
Welcome back to another episode of Painting Lines. Last week we had a pair of 500s that we broke down for you, Dallas and Rotterdam. And this week we had a lot of action between Marseille, Delray Beach, and Argentina. So we'll be giving you the rundown there on those tournaments. But before we jump in, let's discuss the Sinner news that just came out. 3 month suspension. Aidan, give us your thoughts here. What do you think?
I mean, it is crazy to see, but it's also kind of strange. I mean, when this news broke, like almost, I feel like a year ago at this point, it was so insane. We were like, okay, what's the next move in terms of his status? And then it kind of went away. It felt like, okay, they've decided that he isn't liable for this. But now giving him this 3 month suspension, the weirdest aspect is the timing of it because it feels as though we talked about how this is the dead period for tennis, where after the Australian Open, there's a gap. They start to build back into it when they start getting into the Sunshine Double and then more Masters 1000 tournaments. But there's a lot of break time here between the first Grand Slam of the year and the second Grand Slam of the year. And so they've placed his 3 month suspension here. So he'll only lose about 2,100 points in the rankings. He could come back from this suspension and still be the world number one, which I just think is insane given the fact that they're saying essentially that he was guilty, at least partially in this situation. And the timing of it is just so weird.
Yeah, I get it. I think this is kind of the perfect scenario. I mean, it's essentially a plea bargain, right? Because WADA still gets their quote unquote conviction, like they are suspending Sinner, and Sinner is being penalized, but not missing any real like Grand Slams or, for that matter of fact, like big tournaments. So I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. And he essentially is taking responsibility for his team, which is a much lesser you know, um, act than him doing it himself. So I think this is pretty on on par, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, then again, to say that he doesn't miss any big tournaments, like you could argue that the Sunshine Double are a couple of the biggest tournaments of the year, right?
Yeah, yeah. I guess what I'm thinking is he's coming back right before the Italian Open,
Yeah,
like 3 days before,
he's
and
coming
that's his home
back, and
tournament.
then he's going right into Roland Garros right after that too. So he's not going to miss that. But I also think it does provide an opportunity. I want to see
Hmm.
if Zverev can perform really well, he could take a step up and become the world number one in this time, and it could be the best opportunity of his career to do that.
Yeah, I think he would be the second number one to never win a Grand Slam.
Yeah, behind Rios, I think.
Yeah, crazy. So let's get into the player reactions here because I don't think a lot of people are too happy. So first, Stan Wawrinka, he tweeted out, "I don't believe in a clean sport anymore." So he's clearly against this. He thinks it's unfair. And then obviously Kyrgios is very anti-Sinner. He put out a tweet and then at the end of it said, "Sad day for tennis. Fairness does not exist." And then Djokovic, lastly, I was a little surprised by this one, but he came out and he was quoted in an article saying that he spoke with several players in the locker room. Most of them are not satisfied with how the whole process has gone and they don't think it's fair. Which, if you look back, it's not really fair. Like, the same thing has happened to multiple other players, like Jerry, for example. Like, if he had access to, high-end lawyers or other benefits that Sinner had, then I think it would have gone differently. So I can see other players seeing why this isn't fair. I don't think it's fair, but I think life's not fair, and Sinner is the best in the world, so he had access to these things.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at is like a fair versus right scenario, right?
Hmm.
It's like, yes, it isn't fair. That's true because not every single player is getting treated the same way. A lot of players get a similar sort of accusation, let's say, to Sinner, and they're immediately banned before, and they don't get to keep playing. Whereas Sinner was just allowed to keep playing for however many months, and then they put a ban on in like the optimal time for him. Yeah, it doesn't seem very equal for the different players. It's also kind of funny the way Djokovic framed that. Like he's expressing an opinion while also being like, no, no, it wasn't what I'm thinking. It was like
Yeah.
I spoke with other guys. This is what they thought.
Yeah, very political, right? Because he is the head of what is it? Some kind of players union or like player federation. So he's kind of speaking for everyone here.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into these tournaments. So, what do you think of the talent diversification over these three tournaments? Like, did you think it was pretty evenly spread out, or did you think there was one tournament that was more significantly stacked? For example, Rotterdam compared to Dallas last week.
I mean, I feel like it seemed relatively spread out because I feel like there weren't actually that many guys playing. It felt as though, I mean, you saw Zverev in South America. He was the only guy in the top, what, 20 playing down there. And then you have like a random guy, you have Medvedev playing in this tournament in Marseille, and he's the only guy really, it feels like, in the top that's there. And so I guess it was pretty spread out, but it just didn't really seem as though there were that many opportunities for big matchups in these tournaments.
Yeah, I agree. You have three 250s and spreading that talent across. It was just kind of, yeah, no real big names. But let's start with Argentina with probably the biggest news of the week, at least for me, the most exciting. Joao Fonseca wins his first ATP title. He becomes the youngest man in history to win the Argentina Open. And then I saw another stat where I think he's the first person born in like 2006 or later to win an ATP title. So that's freaking wild. The last Brazilian to do this back in Argentina was Gustavo Kuerten back in '01. And I don't know if you know this, but Brazilians and Argentinians don't really get along that well. Like they have beef. I think it stems from the soccer rivalry, being two best South American soccer teams
Two of the
and
best in the
just
world.
two of the best in the world, exactly, right next to each other. So there's a lot of disdain for each other. So I think the fact that Joao Fonseca did this in Argentina is incredible too.
Yeah, and I think actually he was probably getting cheered on by a lot of those Argentinian players just because of how awesome his style of play is, right? Like it's hard to watch him play and not be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe he just did that." But very impressive. I mean, he had three really close matches along the way, including two where he was actually down after the first set, and he defeated four Argentinians. So that's kind of a another nail in the coffin against him, but still just super impressive. Just makes me question how high he's going to be able to get this year because I made the comparison to you that it's kind of like Alcaraz in 2021, where he exploded into the top 100 and then ended the year in the top 35. But Alcaraz didn't break into the top 100, I think, until later, like mid year in 2021. And Fonseca broke in the very beginning of this year. So I want to see, can he end in the top 30? Could he end in the top 25 even? He's shown that he can play at a very high level. It'll be interesting to see when he gets more matchups against top level players. He beat Rublev in the Australian Open, but we want to see some more matchups like that. How can he do against other top 10 guys? And yeah, just exciting to see what he can do.
Yeah, definitely. And what was GMP's ascension? He came from outside the 100 to top 40, right?
Yeah, GMP I think was more like Alcaraz's, right? Where he like middle of the year he was kind of like, oh wait, who is this dude?
Yeah.
And just was all of a sudden on the scene and was like a guy that was contending for to beat top players. So I feel like he probably went from outside the top 100 to top 35 or so.
Yeah, unfortunately, as we're recording this, Fonseca he did just lose his first match in Rio, but kind of expected because of the quick turnaround. Like I don't know. I mean, it's unfortunate because it is his home tournament, but being so close to his last win, I think he's just kind of a little hungover.
100%. Yeah, got that just tiredness.
But in other news, more bittersweet news, Diego Schwartzman just played his last tournament here in Argentina. He ended up getting a first round dub against Jari, but then did fall to Martinez in the second round, thus marking an end to this great career that Diego had. And it was a very emotional scene on match point too. The whole crowd was cheering his name. The ref just kind of let it go on because Martinez like obviously had to stop. He let Diego absorb everything, all the emotion, kind of have his moment there. And he actually won that point too. It was 15-40, got it to 30-40. Everyone was kind of like, "Oh my God, can he extend it? Can he extend it?" But then he did lose that next point. So sad to see him go, but I think he's gonna have I think he'll still be around tennis in his retirement.
Yeah, definitely an emotional moment. But I do like to see when guys get the one win in their last tournament, kind of like Isner got in the U.S. Open a couple years ago, where you're like, yeah, it sucks to see them lose in this tournament, but it's nice to see that they still had a little bit left.
Yeah. Yeah. And Jari's no slouch either. So pretty good
Exactly.
win. Yeah. Topped it off there. And also against another South American. I don't know how the Argentinians feel about Chileans, if they don't like them as much as they like
I
the
mean, I know
Brazilians,
they
but
they
still.
border them as well.
Yeah,
Really
exactly.
long border right around the coast, right there.
Yeah, we're gonna start getting into South American geopolitics. But
Exactly.
anyways, in other news, top seed Zverev. He fell to Cerundolo in the quarters. Aiden, how do you feel about this? Like, are
Yeah.
you surprised here or?
I mean, I just feel like we're put in this world now where it becomes a question like, oh, he lost. He was heavily expected to win the whole thing, but is it a shock? I mean, he I was surprised. He was by far the highest ranked player there, but it also is like, okay, Sarandolo is a good opponent, but yeah, it's just a weird scenario because we've seen guys like Medvedev where we expect him this week to be dominant and he just wasn't. So I don't know. I like I said, I think last week the only two guys that are really shocking to see lose at this point are Sinner and Alcaraz. And with Sinner out, it feels like anyone can lose except for honestly, it feels like anyone can lose because Alcaraz does have those days where he doesn't play at his peak level and he loses to random people. So
Totally.
it feels like everybody's beatable in today's game right now.
Yeah, I think that's well said. More so, I guess a little. I'm a little surprised, not shocked, because as we mentioned before, Zverev was the biggest name in this tournament. So I think I expected him to win it, but like you said, Cerundolo, he's a good player. It's I think it's a respectable loss here.
Yeah, well, I mean, Sarandolo made the quarters at the French last year, right? So
Yeah.
that's pretty impressive. I mean, he got kind of hit with that weird Taylor Fritz moment where he beat or he lost to Djokovic in that super tight five setter, and then Djokovic retired in the next match. So
Yeah.
he borderline could have been in, or he lost maybe the round of 16. He lost to Djokovic in the round of 16, and he could have made the quarters. But
hmm
either way, a good run from him in that tournament. So it shows that he has that high level, especially on clay.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to the next headline, Musetti unfortunately had to retire in the quarters. He gave Martinez a straight shot to the semis. This was unfortunate because he also had to pull out of Rio this week too. So it wasn't like, all right, let me take a rest and then get back into Rio. So it's pretty serious injury. It appears to be a calf injury he put out on social media. So hopefully he can get back for the next tournament. Maybe it's I don't know how bad pulled calves are, but I think it shouldn't be too hindering, at least for the rest of the season.
Well, I wonder what he's going to do. Maybe given the fact that we have like the Sunshine Double coming up in not super soon, but I just wonder what we'll see him do building up to that point because he doesn't want to stress it before the actual big tournaments, the Masters 1000 start happening.
Yeah, I know this isn't clay season, but I feel like a big theme last year was injuries on clay, right? Injuries on other surfaces like clay and grass. So we're seeing it here. I don't think this one's too serious, but I think we'll see him back in action here soon. Moving on here, Runa, I think with a pretty disappointing tournament. He didn't win a match because he got a first round bye and then lost to Navoni in round two. Navoni's pretty good, but Runa is a better player, right?
You mean you'd think we've seen him in the past do better, but it's hard to tell at the beginning of the year. A lot of the guys haven't been playing very well.
Yeah, I know. Man, I saw something, I think on tennis TV or some social media where um a player was asked who's likely to have their mom on tour, something like that, and they mentioned Runa or most likely not to leave his mom's side. So they're
Yeah.
throwing shade on him there.
Yeah, it's weird though, just because Runa had a pretty solid Australian Open. I think he lost to like Sinner in the fourth round or something like that, right?
hmm
And since
Yeah.
then, 1-3.
Yeah, no more big three for this guy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get down to Marseille. First one here, Humbert, he defends his title. This one's a good win for him, back-to-back champ. But then again, this goes back to the theme of lack of talent. His toughest opponents this week were Bublik and Sonigo. I mean, I feel like this is another case of Humbert just sneaking in, right? Doing his thing.
Yeah, completely under the radar. We don't know what's happening with him. And then we're like, oh, I guess Humbert won it. And then
Yeah.
you see that he won it. You're like, okay, that's a good win for him. And it's not shocking that he won it. But then you're also like, why isn't this guy better?
Yeah.
You feel like he should be competing more for top titles, and it doesn't always feel like he is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Then again, last
But
year at the Paris, didn't he make the final? I think.
yeah, he played Zverev.
Yeah. So I think we just underrate Humbert.
Yeah, I know. He's just lunch pail guy.
Yeah.
Gets it done. He's in the top 20.
It's
It's not
crazy.
glamorous work. Yeah, he doesn't make deep runs in the big turns, but he chips away at these 250s.
Yeah, I think it's just the lack of the slam success kind of for him.
Hmm.
Like he does well overall if you look at the full year, but because there's so much of a spotlight on the slams and he hasn't done anything crazy at them, we kind of overlook him a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. But what a week for next gen ATP finals winners. So Fonseca won it this year, and then he just won his first ATP title over there in Argentina. And then Medvedev, he won the year before. And while he didn't win Marseille, he's still finaled here. And I think that's a big statement too, especially with a win over Medvedev in the semis.
Yeah, I mean it's a little like Zverev though, isn't it? Like I mean, obviously a little more so with Medvedev, where he hasn't done anything this year, whereas Zverev obviously made the Australian Open final. So we know that he has a higher level this year. So like in other words, Zverev's loss seems more like shocking than Medvedev's, but it's still a nice win, but it's just less than it would
Yeah.
have been maybe if he'd beaten him here last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny, Medvedev and Medvedev, very,
Yeah.
very close. Anyway, ZZ Shang, he had a big win over Hurkacz in the second round here. I was very surprised with this one. And Zhang actually was rocking like purple hair and a pink headband this week. So he's got that flair. I think that might have distracted Hurkacz.
Isn't that kind of like what uh Bellucci had last week or something like that?
No, Bellucci did not have purple hair. Bellucci just had a bandana,
Oh, just a bandana.
like an
Okay.
old-fashioned bandana. No, the purple hair and pink headband was something else.
Yeah, they're just trying to distract with the hairstyles,
I
man.
think so.
That's the new way to beat the top players.
Yeah, well, at least we're seeing, more personality in tennis too. I feel like we went a while without like players adding their own flair.
Well, I mean, we got Alcaraz. We just Sinner just soaks up all sorts of personality, right?
Yes, exactly. All right, how about Stroofwafel? I feel like we don't talk about him enough, mostly because he hasn't really done much here, but he got back into the quarterfinals here. I think this was the last time since what was it, the Boss Open over the summer. So for a second, I was thinking because of Argentina when I was doing the research there that, I just assumed he was on clay, and he actually does well on clay, surprisingly for his game style. But
We
no, this
know
was
we know
a,
that, right? He his
yeah,
biggest thing I remember a couple of years ago was he made that final in where was it, Madrid?
yeah, that was Alcaraz, right? Against Alcaraz?
I think so, yeah. And
Yeah,
that was like the biggest thing of his career.
right. He got brutalized by the crowd. I remember watching that. It's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough.
But
And
yeah,
then the old bat Wawrinka, he was still out there, but he had a first round loss to Borges.
yeah.
Um, this was kind of something we were talking about before with Schwartzman, right? Like it's good when they get a win. Not to say that this is Wawrinka's last tournament, but if he keeps on going this way, when he announces what his last tournament will be, hopefully he can at least get a win instead of losing
Yeah.
first round because he's been doing that a lot lately.
You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's not that bad of a loss to Borges. Borges is a good player, but it's also like what would have been a bad loss, right? Where do we actually rate Wawrinka at this point? Do we rate him as being able to beat guys in the top 50? If he loses to a guy in the top 100, do we consider it a bad loss? Where do we actually rate him in terms of his ability today versus thinking back on how good he was?
That's such an interesting question.
I just feel like we start to get lower and lower standards for these players as their careers go on, where we're like, oh, okay, he lost the boards, but that's not that bad of a loss. Like, what would have been? Would if he lost in the first round of a challenger, would then that be a bad loss? Probably. But
Yeah. It's just the name carries so much weight, It's like a Murray, it's like a Nadal, like seeing those guys. And even Djokovic too. He had a first round loss this week too in Doha.
yeah, it is kind of funny though. I think about this sometimes. Like these players that are at the top make so much money now that they can retire and be fine after whatever. Murray is playing maybe like when he retired was probably playing like a number 85 guy, let's say in the world. By the time he retired, maybe a number 100 guy in the world. But if he didn't have enough money, it would be crazy to see him like 5 years from now just continuing to play like challengers, like grinding it out on the circuit. I just think it is positive that they can retire and we don't have to see them kind of like completely devolving. Because if they needed the money, Murray could keep playing professional tennis, just not at the same high level.
Yeah, well, that's a good transition into Delray Beach. If Murray needed a car, he could try to enter this tournament because they were giving away a sweet BMW. I love
Oh
when they
yeah,
have the cars like on the court, it's like in the corner.
yeah,
And
$100.
I want to see a tennis ball fucking rocket into it so bad.
Yeah. I wonder, was Delray Beach actually the most stacked tournament this week because it had a bunch of Americans?
I think so. I mean, it was very American heavy, yes. I think it had the big names.
Okay. Yeah.
Like
Maybe the
not
biggest
necessarily
names.
like for
Yeah.
example, Lerner Tien, like I think he's a big name now. He's not necessarily a top player.
Yeah. Bigger name, maybe.
Bigger name, yeah, exactly. Well, big names for Americans.
Yes.
All right, let's start out with Kecmanovic. I feel like he came out of nowhere. He wins this title. It's the first one since 2020 when he won back in Kitzbühel, and he did it in astonishing fashion. So he had to save two match points in this final. He was down, he went down 3-6 and then won 6-1 and then was down 2-5, 15-40 and
Oh my
he
God.
wins the final. And not only does he win the final, but he wins the doubles final too with Nakashima.
That's
How
pretty
often does
sick.
that happen? Yeah, this dude just doubled in Del Rey. And
Crazy. It's pretty crazy to do that in like a professional tournament. I feel like usually when you see guys like make deeper runs in a tournament, they just stop playing doubles.
yeah, of course. I mean, apparently he lives in Florida, so this is kind of a home tournament for him too, which is
Nice.
pretty funny.
Got his home crowd on his side.
Yeah. And then this was pretty juicy. We got a Mickelson Mo beef. So I'm gonna get right into it. It was kind of unclear what exactly happened, but I saw a video that a fan had taken on the phone from the bleachers where Mo is walking back to the bench after taking a bathroom break. He said something to Mickelson. You can't really understand it, but then Mickelson started kind of yelling at him, saying, "I'm not talking to you. Don't talk to me," and was pointing at him. And then you can hear Mickelson talking to the ref, saying that he started it. Like, I was talking to you, and then he started chirping me. And I think it had to do something with Mickelson kind of asking the ref about the length of the bathroom break that Mo was taking. And he just did it like as Mo was walking by. So obviously Mo is going to say something if you're like literally talking shit right in front of him to the ref. So there wasn't that much of a beef after the match because Mickelson was asked about it and he pretty much shut the question down and said that they're all good, they're fine. He's not talking about it. And they shook hands after the match. It didn't seem too spicy. But I love it. I love it. I love how Mickelson has that chippiness to him. He's not afraid to argue.
Yeah, he's like the getting his pointers from Medvedev.
Yeah, and it's such an American saying to be like, he was chirping me.
Dude, he's chirping me. Stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Anyway,
pretty funny.
and then my bet of the week hit. We had Opelka over Eubanks, and I forgot to mention last week that I was looking at the lines, and there was the odds for a tiebreak in the match because I was thinking of throwing out a prop bet here were minus 350, and of course there was a tiebreak. We have two serve pots here.
Yeah,
Are
it
you
was
surprised?
the least shocking bet hit of all time.
Right. Yeah, and then going back to our boy Lerner 10, he made it to the second round, but then lost to Arnaldi. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about this match?
I mean, I think it was a very tight match, and realistically, if you look at where Tien is ranked, it's not a bad loss for him. I think
Hmm.
we give him a lot of credit for how well he did in the Australian Open, but we don't want to overrate him too quickly. He isn't
Oh, we don't?
necessarily at the same level of as Fonseca.
Yeah, that's what we do. We just overrate people. But I feel like he's got a thing against Italians because wasn't it Sonigo who ended his run in Australia, and then
There's a
now we
lot of
got
good Italians
Arnaldi.
though on the tour right now.
Yes, yes, Italians are making a comeback here.
Yeah.
And then the biggest upset of the tournament was Fritz losing in the quarters to Davidovich Fokina, and this was a two-setter too. I was pretty shocked. Great run by Fokina though. He made it to the finals. He's still chasing that elusive title, though. He has not won a title, and this win over Fritz actually was one of the biggest wins of his career. And honestly, it was good to see in a finals because I feel like you don't really see that, especially on hard.
Yeah, I mean, it just sucks though. Like, just as you talked about it when you just started talking about this tournament, he was so close to getting it done, and then just wasn't able to close it out. When you're up 5-2 as well, it's like you have multiple chances. You're gonna be able to serve for this set at least one time. So really a bummer there. It's just kind of crazy how close he's been. I mean, he's played in a Masters 1000 final, and yet he has never won a title. Kind of
Hmm.
to me reminds me of Rude, where Rude is like played in a Grand Slam final, but has never won like a. He's won
Yeah.
one title at like a ATP 500. He's never won a Masters 1000. So kind of similar, where it's like he can make the runs at the biggest level, but can't perform necessarily.
Yeah, I think it's all mental at this point, right? You're up 5-2 in the last set of a final and you up 40-15, you choke it.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about that a few times. It is all mental, 100%.
Hmm. But overall thoughts of the week, I thought the lower seeds definitely outperformed. We didn't have
100%. Yeah, I
we didn't
mean
have any big names.
Medvedev, Fritz, and Zverev all didn't even really come that close to winning it.
Uh-huh. And then Aiden, to cap things off, I have a trivia question for you. All right.
Sounds good. Shoot.
So in 2025, there were three opportunities for people/teams to three-peat. Can you name the three people or three teams that were going for three-peats this year?
Three peats. I mean, the Chiefs.
Chiefs are one.
I don't know, like Man City winning the Premier League 3 years in a
No,
row.
think tennis. I'll give you a hint. The other two are tennis.
The other two are tennis.
Hmm.
And they have to do it this week.
Um, I'll give you a hint. One has to do with this week. The other has to do with Australia.
Fritz three-peat Delray Beach.
Yep.
Uh, and this is what's the last one have to do with?
Australia. Australian Open.
Going for three-peat.
Yeah. I'll give you a hint on the other side of the draw. Or in the other draw.
Sabalenka three-peat in
Yes,
Australian
yes.
Open. Okay.
I thought for sure you would get that one. I thought the
Yeah.
Fritzy one was going to be tough.
Well, you got it. Kind of gave me a hint that it was this week, but yeah,
Yeah,
no. I
that's
mean,
true.
with the hints, it was a lot easier. I would not have gotten it without the hints there.
Yeah.
But alrighty, you ready to hop into segments?
Yep, let's do it. Hey guys, before we jump in, we have some exciting news. We recently partnered with TruePro. They're a great place to buy strings, grips, and tennis apparel. Use discount code Painting Lines, that's one word, for 20% off store wide. You can find the link in our bio.
Alrighty, what's new in tennis? What'd you see this week?
All right, I saw something spicy. I saw some more beef or a potential beef. Djokovic throws shade at John McEnroe. Like, out of all people, John McEnroe. So let me get into it. Um, he was asked in Doha about sharing his photo of the MRI on X. Remember, we had covered this a few weeks ago, and he responded with, um, especially when it comes from some people who are really legends of the sport, who have a multi-million audience that listens to them and they broadcast the matches. Then I felt the need to react to show the recording from the MRI. And it was John McEnroe who was broadcasting the match when he pulled out. And he said during the broadcast, he said, "This isn't the first time we've seen this routine. Don't be fooled." I wish I could do a good John McEnroe voice because I'm just imagining him saying it. And my thoughts are that Djokovic just took this way too personally. I think he concluded from this that McEnroe just insinuated that he was faking it, which I don't think he was. I think McEnroe is just saying shit just to say shit to entertain people. And I get why Djokovic is pissed because it's kind of questioning his integrity, but I don't feel the need to start throwing shade at Johnny Mac here.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get both sides here. I mean, I don't think McEnroe really meant that much by it, but I definitely understand Djokovic being like, dude, are you saying I'm faking this? Like, this is why I'm putting it out there is because you're saying, hey, this guy's pretending to be injured, which is
Hmm.
a pretty just aggressive accusation.
Yeah, no, it is. But anyway, what about you? What did you see this week?
I saw that the Italian Open has made a bid to acquire the Madrid Open,
Ooh.
uh, with a bid of apparently around $550 million, and it's believed that they want to do this so that they can kind of obtain that slot in the calendar and try to become a fifth major tournament. Uh, when you see this, obviously the headline was that they're trying to become another major. And immediately my question is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? I think the response to it was mainly negative, but I think there are some pros and cons. I mean, the pros is that we've talked about even in this episode, there is a dead period after the Australian Open. It's a long time from the Australian Open in January to the French Open in May. If you had another major at some point in between there, maybe in early March or something like that, or maybe in late March, maybe April, somewhere in that time period, it might help maintain a steady audience for the entire tennis season. I don't. I think the negative is that it's going to be hard to actually have people treat it as with the same level as the other majors, where the other ones have been around for, I think, with the French Open is the youngest and it's over 100 years old, so it's just going to be difficult to get that level of sort of, I don't know, mystique or like just historical context with the tournament with something like the Italian Open, which hasn't had that same level. It has been around for a while, but it hasn't been a major. So, and I also wonder about what the sort of reverse engineering of major winners becomes. Right? If you
Hmm.
look at that, all of a sudden, Nadal has won that tournament 10 times. Has he now won 34 majors?
Yeah.
Tough to say.
That is interesting. So you're saying it becomes an actual major, not like the fifth major like Indian Wells, where it's nicknamed, right? The fifth slam or something.
Yeah, where it's just a big tournament. I think the idea is they would actually get approval from the Grand Slam
Wow.
sort of committee.
Yeah, I don't like that. I'm kind of a traditionalist in some sense, but also I feel like you can't call them grand slams anymore, right? Because that's a four
Yeah, but
uh
that's also just like a
term, four
baseball. I feel
variable
like that's a
term.
baseball sort of connotation, right? Grand Slam.
It is, but it's used. I mean, I think it's used pretty prevalently.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's tough to say. We'll see if what happens with this. We'll keep an eye on it, but I
Yeah,
don't know. I don't
that's
even know
good.
if Madrid will accept their bid, but
That's true. Yeah, you got some. What was this in the Financial Times? You got some M&A
yeah,
news here.
exactly. Uh,
All right.
how about a bet of the week?
Bet of the week. I'm going with a three-pick parlay this week. I'm going Deminar, FAA, and Draper at -139. So Deminar has Van de Zandschulp. FAA has Medvedev, who appears to be extremely injured. I don't know if you saw that match against Tsitsipas. And Draper has O'Connell. So Demon, I feel like, is the biggest lock. He does very well against, um, how do I put this? He does well against like lower ranked player. Like he does his job. He cannot beat higher ranked players to save his life, but he handles lower ranked players very well. He's 2-0. Medvedev looks extremely hurt. Like he beat Tsitsipas. He basically got injured in the match, did like a full split. Looks like he tore his groin right off his bone. Like could barely walk, was hobbling and just ripping winners.
How did he still win the match
I
though?
go see, but he won it in a tiebreaker, and I feel like he's not gonna be able to walk tomorrow. Like this injury looked bad, and he was just limping all over. So unless he's hustling me, I
Well,
don't know. He could
here's
be.
the risk then, right? Of making this bet is it might just get canceled if Medvedev doesn't play, right?
That's yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking he might pull out here, and then the last leg is Draper, which I think is the riskiest one because he's actually 0-1 against O'Connell. But that match was a year ago, and Draper's obviously like significantly improved since then. So I'm going with I would say safer bets.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that Medvedev one is crazy. Just betting on FAA always a nuts move to me. But also given the fact that he might not even play, and if he does play, it probably means that he believes he can win, right? So
Yeah. And if he does play but has to retire, they still give me credit for that.
okay, so that could be a
Yeah.
possibility, but
Yep.
we'll see how that goes.
All right.
I'm
How about you?
I'm going with Marozsan again. I think this is back-to-back weeks here. I'm going plus 250 over Lehechka. First up, Marozsan has the head-to-head lead of 1-0. And honestly, he's played very solid this year. I mean, I think he's gotten at least one win in every tournament he's played. He does already have a win in this tournament, so a little bit of momentum coming in here. But also, I just kind of feel obligated to pick him whenever I see him with positive odds now. Like, he's just so, I think, underrated as a player because he does have bad losses sometimes.
Yeah, he's just upset potential.
100%. 100%. How about a match of the week?
Match of the week, I'm going with the Delray Beach final. I'm going with Kecmanovic winning the final against Davidovich Fokina. Like I said before, he had to come down after being down 2 championship points in a couple games. So this match, it was exciting and had a lot of excitement. They split sets, each pretty much dominating their respective set. I think it was 6-3, then 6-1 each player. And then that obviously set the stage for a pretty interesting third set, which Kecmanovic had to come back from 2-5, won 5 straight games, and then took the final set 7-5, completely collapsed to the ground. And, I love when players do that because it really shows the emotion. It shows like a week culminating to this moment where you just kind of get to live in that moment, soak it all up. And not only did this match have excitement, but it also had grit. I feel like you have two guys playing for this final, two guys who desperately needed a final, who don't often make finals. So they were chasing down every ball. They weren't conceding anything. They were playing tough physical tennis, and I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, definitely an exciting one. And I agree. I think it's great to watch those matches when guys aren't conceding any points
Hmm.
because sometimes players, that's not their style. Some guys, they're more likely to win a game if they save a bit of energy and then play harder on the next point. But when you see guys going all out, I love that. I love to watch that. That's why Deminar is one of my favorite players because he just never gives up a point. But definitely a cool match.
Yeah, I'll be pretty honest. I mean, if I bought tickets to the Delray Beach final and I saw Kecmanovic and Davidovich Fokina, are you kidding me? But I gotta say, these fans definitely got their money's worth with the way these two played.
Yeah, well, I think also it's you probably get a more interesting match when it's Davidovich Fokina and Kecmanovic, right?
Hmm.
If it's Fritz versus I don't know Tommy Paul, it's like that matchup is going to continue to happen a lot of other times, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
But this final is only ever going to happen once.
Hmm. Yeah, it's unique. Definitely is
Exactly.
unique. How about you? What was your match of the week?
I'm going with Fonseca surviving against Navone.
Mm.
It was a tense match, back and forth. First set, Navone jumped out on top of him early, went up 5-1. But even by the end of that first set, it almost seemed like it was already starting to shift back towards Fonseca a little bit because he broke back and then actually had 3 chances to break a second time. But Navone ended up holding on and winning the set. Second set was very topsy-turvy. 5 breaks of serve in this set, actually. And that included 4 in a row right in the middle there. Fonseca ended up breaking right at the end, taking the set. And then they go into this third set, and it was very different. Navoni broke early, and it looked like he might just hold it out. Like it was different from the other ones where there were a bunch of breaks. All of a sudden, we had one where there was a bunch of holds. And right at the end of that set, Navoni gets 2 break match points at 3-5. And Fonseca is able to hold on, hold his serve. Next game, Fonseca comes out and breaks Navoni, makes it even. And then in a tense final game, Fonseca had a couple match points. Navoni battles it back to deuce, but then couldn't hold on, ends up losing in what ended up being a very great match. Kind of interesting, though, in that last game where I feel like it shows a mindset issue, which is you are able to battle back to make it deuce, and you almost take your foot off the gas a little bit because you're like, okay, my back's not against the wall as much. Maybe you got to play like your back is against the wall. I feel like Fonseca plays free, but he also is just like, I'm going to go for it no matter what, and doesn't feel the pressure because he's not feeling that tensity of like, okay, I'm going to lose and then the match is going to be over. He's like, I'm just going to go for it no matter what, whether I'm going to lose this point or not, whether I'm going to lose the match on this point or not. Whereas Navoni maybe felt a little bit of pressure, played a little tight, and then played a little too loose once he got back to deuce.
Yeah, definitely. That was an incredible match. I do remember watching one of the points there where it was like a back and forth, and Fonseca, he should have won the point like 2 or 3 times, and he had an overhead that he should have put away, didn't, and then Navoni got it back, and then I think Fonseca hit a drop volley, and Navoni ran it down, hit a crazy angle, and then just sat there as the crowd erupted and kind of gave him like one of these, like really fed into it. So I feel like that just kind of was the epitome of this match, like back and forth, kind of like crowd involved, very exciting.
100%. And the two South American players. So definitely
Yeah, exactly.
aspect there.
But it is, dude, for Fonseca being such a young player and having this mental fortitude.
100%.
All right, and that's the show. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Painting Lines Podcast. Feel free to shoot us a DM or email us any questions or thoughts at paintinglinespodcast@gmail.com.